Alrighty. What is up, everybody? Happy New Year. December 2020 has officially ended the year. Um, and I'm just like almost a little bit speechless with the opportunity in this market. This is something that certainly will not last. Uh, like this month is only possible making $223,000 almost from just having an A plus opportunity almost every single day, at least every other day. Uh, and it just blew my best month out of the water. My best month was, I believe, in July of around, what was it, 79? Yeah, almost 80,000. So, at 223, I mean, I almost blew my best month by triple. It's just insane to think about. And part of it is really just taking bigger risks. In a sense, yes, I had a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great plays, and we'll go over those. But in a lot of ways, I also just sized up, and I would say I sized up on accident and on purpose, right? It was a little bit of both, where I didn't go into December planning on sizing up, but once it came, and I saw myself taking bigger size because the plays that were happening were just so good, that I had such high conviction, and then I started taking these bigger size losses, and I kind of like reflected on my account size, like, am I sizing too big? And I thought about it, and I was like, no, no, I'm actually sizing quite appropriately for my account size, for the plays that are happening, for the market we're in. So that's what you see, you know, previous months. If you look, my average loss is only like $400, $400, $500. And then you see my average loss in December is like 1,600, almost 3 to 4 times bigger. And that's like totally on purpose. At least it started, at least it ended on purpose. Again, like I said, in the start, it was like almost on accident. It was like, oh, am I taking too big of losses? And I looked at my account size, like, and everything. Like I said, it's like, no, no, this is the market to push. Like, this market will not last. The amount of opportunities coming every single day is, rarely happens. It does not happen like this all the time. So I said, yeah, this is absolutely time to push. And it paid off, right? It gave me my first six-figure month, and just an incredible experience. And hopefully, it could keep going on to January. We'll see. But again, this is just something that does not last. And it goes in waves. Like, it'll come back. It might come back in a few years, or, next year or whatever. But the point is, the market goes in cycles. And when it's hot, you got to push. And so that's exactly what I did. And it resulted even some bigger losses too. Like we'll see on the 18th, I'll go over this trade that led to this bigger of a loss. Um, but that's what happens, right? When you increase your size, the gains are bigger, and as well do the losses. So we're going to go through, as usual, week by week, best trades and worst trades. And then I will go over the stats at the end for the year, and what I will try to plan for 2021. So let's jump right into it. The first week here, this biggest day that pretty much tied my entire November. I said I would talk about it in my November recap, but I actually made a twist episode with Matt in the beginning of December that I actually talk about in pretty good detail about WNEW, ZNOG, and TSNP, which are really the three main traders or the stocks that I traded the entire first week. Like, this entire week, and mainly this day, was like all these tickers here. This run up on these first two red days, and then this big red day here. And then TSNP was such a great liquid low price runner that it pretty much offered a panic dip buy opportunity like almost every day. So I will link that twist episode, and go watch that just to save some time, because I've pretty much gone over these trades in that episode. So you'll see the link in the description, or something will pop up, and you can watch that to see me go over these trades here. So going into week 2, we had HTZGQ. So this isn't your typical price action, I would say. Like, if we compare like ZNOG, it pretty much extends itself from the beginning, kind of. I guess maybe WNDW is a better example, where from the beginning it has a lot of range and it really gets going. Where HTC, I mean, it really had few grinding days, like even a couple of red days, before it finally really started to extend itself. But once it starts doing that, then I know, okay, the backside is likely coming, and it's going to be better than if it had just never extended itself, right? If we had a first red day down at like $2 instead of never getting above 250, it would have never been that great of a red day. I might not even have shorted it. But when you start extending yourself like this, that's when I get interested, and that's when I really look to start getting short. So if we go into the intraday here, can I even get it? Here we go. Yeah, cool. So again, like I said, when it was grinding up, I'm really not that interested. I want to see the speed up. I want to see the overextension really get ahead of itself. Um, And so that's what these 2 days did. Now, into this crack, I remember watching it and I was like, please don't go any lower, right? We need this to at least hold its gains, right? Because if it started panicking, the less likely I want to short. I don't really want to chase something into the close and hold overnight just because if news comes out or a gap up, and even then, even if I short over overnight, it still would have closed green probably, considering the red green close was 190. So I just was really hoping not to short this. And luckily it did come back. So like, okay, great. Coming out the open, we then morning spike, and I said, perfect, another day, higher the better. And then we dip into the close here. And so the same thinking as this time, I was like, really just hold up into the close. Like, let me just wait to short into the morning. Because again, most of the best emotional and or biggest range moves usually happen in the first hour in the morning. So whenever there's a late day fade or something action happens in late day, I really try to refrain from shorting it or trading it, just because the morning is usually a better bang for your buck, I should say. It's a little bit more predictable in my opinion and from my personal experience. So when we pilled here, I said, okay, let's just hold up and we'll look to we'll look to reevaluate this play the next morning. And so that's what happens. In the next morning, we actually go red for the first time, so I short, and we actually come back, and I actually have my trades here, HTZ. So you can see it here. I short out the open, cover a little bit because I knew I was pretty big size, and I unfortunately this last arrow was a little bit of a chase. It was quite hard to fill. Even though you see all this volume coming in, the reality was it was only at a couple key prices, and there was actually quite little like air gaps of or bubble gaps of price action or of prices and liquidity. So like when it was panicking, the panic started at 250, but I mean the next best bid was like 245. It was like quick. So the chances of you getting any fills at 249, 248, 247 just didn't happen on this ticker. So that's why you see this lower candle, because I finally didn't get filled to like the next lowest bid, which ended up being kind of a little bit of a chase. So that's why I did cover some. And then we come back green, and because the high of day for this day was pretty much around red green, it never had a morning spike or any kind of test of the highs to then go red. There was no really resistance in the morning. Um, Now I could have risked again previous high day, which would have worked. Um, but the size, again, like I said, the size I took in this move right here, I just couldn't afford it. Maybe I should have downsized and held a smaller piece for high day risk from yesterday, but I just didn't, and I cut it all for I think like 1 or 2 grand loss. But then when it came back, I knew essentially in hindsight after it happened and it topped out at this 260 level, which was around previous high days resistance. I thought, okay, this is actually still a chance to have a first red day, especially because it failed right there and then comes right back right on the day. Now, the part I hate the most about this trade is that even though you see a bunch of entries here, they weren't good entries. It's hard to tell with the candles, but I mean, I remember shorting. I mean, I could have easily got an above a 250 average shorting, this little pop here and right before it went red on this panic right here. But instead, I end up shorting. Again, it was more. There was all these air pockets of liquidity, so I kept shorting in like the 246s, the 247s, 245s, and 8 cents between like a 253 average and 245 average doesn't seem like a big deal. But when you start taking 10, 20, 30,000 shares, that becomes like thousands of dollars in just a few cents. And that was a big eye opener to me, especially starting off only the second week of me like really pushing size in some of these better runners. So I quickly realized like, man, I'm just giving money away by just shorting at will and not really trying to be picky. And then unfortunately, when I try to get picky a little bit, especially into this bounce back to red green, I didn't feel any. I mean, I'm pretty sure if I look at the trades, yeah, like this last little perk to red green here, I remember trying to sit on the ass, like trying to get a better entry, and they didn't fill me. So again, it's a gift and a curse to try to get size you want, and but also try to get it at a good price. You can't always get the best of both worlds, especially on a ticker like this. Like I said, with air pockets and kind of spots of liquidity that aren't really there when you think they should be there. So I did get one more small ad as we started breaking new morning lows. Start panicking pretty well. And this one had a lot of fake outs. This is a former NASDAQ ticker. And so usually former NASDAQ tickers that go to the OTC aren't as smooth as a traditional OTC. They're a little bit choppier. And so that's exactly what this one was. We had a fake out here, another fake out here. So by that time, I was pretty much all covered and missed, these last two main panics below two. So it's not a big deal, but I also did talk about this on the second twist episode of December. And just I could have traded better. I'm happy with making. I think it was, how much did I make? Like over $7,000 on this trade. But again, like I said, the few cents better of an average, getting caught out in these couple of fake outs, stopping out all of it here instead of maybe downsizing or just having a better trade plan from the beginning to risk the previous high day. All of it together came to be not as good of a trade as I wanted, right? If I just, minimized those mistakes or even avoided maybe two or three of them, it just would have been such a better trade. But again, it happens. I think that's what makes me a better trader, right? It's not, yes, I made money. That's awesome. But if I just made 7 grand and be like, oh, who cares? Like, let's just move on. Like, how am I going to improve on that? You're never going to get better if you just accept a win or a loss as it is and not analyze, like, could I have done it better? Regardless of the P&L, what could I fix? What could I improve on? And so those were the things I could have improved on. Like I said, maybe partially downsizing here or just sizing in more appropriate for this risk level, trying to be a little bit more precise on my entries, and then having a little more conviction to not really care about maybe the first or second fake out, knowing it might have been choppy, considering it, it's a little bit choppy on the way up. So some good lessons there. Then we move on to MMEDF. This was a beautiful runner that just kept going. I mean, I remember getting not caught, but I remember struggling to see how this couldn't have a red day on this little red candle here, because it actually held up really well. And I knew when it held up like this, I was going to cover it all because I just could not short overnight, considering how well it's holding its highs. And of course, the next day, any stubborn short did get squeezed, and went up over $1 to $1.50 a share. But coming into the top day, I had this was probably the pinnacle peak of me sizing up this month, where I was still. This is where I really made the realization between HGZ and then MMEDF that, like, I'm going to be sizing up this month. This is where it became on purpose, right? This is where prior it was more an accident. Like, I just realized how great the stocks were, but this is where it became, okay, I can actually handle this size and I could push it. MMEDF was the peak of that because I realized there's still a limit to how much I should size up. I shouldn't just size up and not still put parameters on myself. Like, so for example, with MMEDF, I size up almost to a point of if you're watching this and you've been trading long enough, sizing up has its struggles, right? I'm a human being, you're a human being. Sizing up brings on a lot of emotions until you can get used to it, right? Until you can set your bar higher and get used to that and get kind of, adapt and get used to that new bar of that new size. Making that adjustment can be emotional, right? You're more susceptible to making mistakes. You're more susceptible to making emotional decisions. And so unfortunately, with MMEDF, I kind of pushed that bar just a little bit too high, and I made a lot of mistakes. Now I did come out green on almost all the backside trades I took, just because I'm putting myself in high odds positions. So even while making mistakes, you're still able to give yourself a good chance of profiting. Um, but I mean, in terms of how much money I left on the table due to the mistakes I made, I mean, it's painful. So like, let's look at the trades here. Let's go MMEDF here. So coming into this day, um, like I said, after squeezing about $1.50 above, when we should have had a red day, we did have a red day here, but instead of having the true backside move here, we then squeeze again. We speed up, like I talked about with HGZ the last 2 days. I had a feeling we could have the potentially of a late day fade. Only because when you start to extend yourself like that so much and you don't close strong and you start the weaker you get into the close, it's just more likely that a late day fade will come. And so you kind of see that here where it had this kind of morning action that ended, and you see all these tops here, like almost like 5 or 6 attempts to try to get back over 490, and you just can't. And then you see all these support levels around 460, 470, 480, and they start to get lower, right? This one gets a little lower than these two. This one's lower than that one. This one's lower than that one. And all of a sudden, then you start seeing the higher lows or the higher highs start to get lower, right? For the first time right here, we actually can't even test the 490 level anymore. So at that point, I'm thinking, yeah, this has a very good chance of actually fading into the close. And so I think that's why you start to see me, you even start to see me take some shorts here into that new lower low. And then once we start making new lower lows below VF, I really start to size in, start covering a little bit, because again, this is where I'm like back to the sizing part. I'm almost taking like way more size, like probably double or triple more size instead of only like maybe 20 or 30% more size. And it wasn't like I was taking risks that I wasn't willing to accept. I was willing to accept bigger risks in this trade. I was never like, going in over my head, but just the size I was taking. I mean, at one point I had up to 50,000 shares. Um, and so to see that money move like that and then have me be up like so much down here, um, didn't really affect me. It started to affect me once I gave it all back into this bounce. And so that's like with the gift and curse where I'm pretty good at not trading my P&L. So when we were down here, I'm thinking, perfect, this is like the official backside move. It's going to go lower the next day, which in hindsight it did. But I just totally did not expect that this thing was going to bounce this hard, like to go from 360 almost pretty much to 460. Like I just did not expect this kind of a bounce to happen. So when I only cover like a fourth of my size down here, um, and then I add that size right back into this bounce, and then it keeps going. If this started breaking like 460, like if this bounce kept going over this 460, I would have had to cut it, and I probably would have given all my profits back from this cover. Um, and so I thought, okay, great, we failed. Hopefully, we're gonna start fading below 4 into the close, because that would have been the perfect price action, and I would have really loved to keep my short overnight. But then we don't, right? We start to uptrend, and at that point, like I said, after being up a lot unrealized and to almost nothing unrealized at this point, I just couldn't do it, right? At this point, I've taken myself through this huge roller coaster of emotions, and to still close green and just close way stronger than I expected. I really didn't think we were going to close over 4. Like, went into this move, I knew we were going to bounce, but I really thought we were going to fail, at like 430 at the worst, and then come back and close like 380. Um, so to close the way we did, I said I just can't do it. I can't take it. I gotta close. I gotta cover. I cannot risk another gap up to like 460, 470, and then a run to like 550. Like I just can't. It's just not worth the risk. It really isn't. Um, so what was a 20 or 30, or I think at the peak, almost like a 40K gain down here, turned into me making like 5,000. So like I said, when I say painful, like, I mean that that sucks. But again, it's like I'm not trading the P&L. That's why I was able to get over it enough, because it's like, yeah, it sucks to give that back. But I mean, like I said, if I was just maybe a little bit, if I sized down a little bit more and I was able to just see a little more clearly and not just be so aggressive to where I couldn't, where I was too emotional, you know, swinging a smaller amount and then really adding the next day on this day when they put out an offering, and then really sticking my plan that way. I mean, fading it down below here would have been great. It would have gone to like, yeah, the low threes, even the next day where I really intended to cover, right? I really thought this could go to $3 from when I started shorting here. And I knew it wasn't going to do that all in this one day. It wasn't just going to panic from 450 to 3. I knew we were going to bounce at some point, and then the next red day or the next day was going to really show the true weakness. But like I said, just having too big of size, and being given a price action move that I just did not expect, and I didn't react well to it, resulted in, again, a lot of missed profits. I did end up reshorting. I did cover it all, like I said, in the close. Did reshort a little bit here, but I think I had the trades here, and I just really screwed up. I really got emotional with it all. So like I said, if you go here, I started shorting in the morning, but then after getting caught in this big of a bounce, I almost got like scarred, right? And so when you see this bounce, this huge bounce right here, like look at me, I'm like covering the top. Like in hindsight, I could do nothing but just laugh at myself, right? I'm just covering into strength because I just think this thing is gonna like emotionally go back to my entry above, up in the near red green. Like it's just dumb, and because really this should have been ads, right? I should have been adding back to my position here, not covering it all. And so then I get emotional. I start trying to scalp it a couple times. It doesn't lead to anything. I end up being break even on like these few trades right here. Um, so yeah, I made another like 4 grand on this trade because again I'm taking bigger size, but it really was a good lesson because it set the tone for the rest of the month for me to really size up, but size up appropriately. That would make sense. Like don't size up irresponsibly. Um, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much the lesson. It was a good lesson because luckily that only happened in the second week, and I was able to really take the next 3 weeks on a much better path, I should say. So let's go into week 3. RSCF beautiful, beautiful runner. I mean, from 50 cents to over $3 in just like 3 or 4 days. Really, really awesome. This was definitely one of my bigger gains on the month. If we go here, but this one was tricky. This one was not as smooth as some runners are. And as you can see here, I mean, just looking at the chart, I mean, it dips, all these dips that recover. Plenty. I mean, when most runners when they pull like this much, I know at least in OTC, they usually don't come back. And this one did. I remember taking a loss around the same level. I remember shorting like this $2 breakdown, and then when it came back over two, I just had to cut it. And as you can see here, it actually held the previous day's highs. Like the highs were like 180, its low was 180. So I just kept holding it. It was impressive. I mean, even this dip into the close to then gap up huge the next day, it's just impressive. The stock really was able to hold until it couldn't hold anymore. And so if we go to my trades here, let's get rid of these. So RSCF here. I took a pretty big loss covering these here. I think I lost like 4 or 5 grand, but and it sounds like a lot. Like again, like for my average loss to be 1,600, like how are you taking that big of a loss? But again, this is where it was again sizing up responsibly, but sizing up aggressively, right? I knew this stock being up so much from 50 cents to $3. Like this is the type of play I look for. It's a beautiful daily chart. It is a little bit trickier of price action, but I just knew once the backside was really in, it was going to pay, right? No matter how many losses I took on the front side, I knew if I just stuck to how I wanted to manage our risk and accept bigger losses, the size I would take on the backside was going to pay off. Just in terms of a risk reward standpoint, like almost, and actually, Jack Kellogg, I don't know if he's talked about it publicly, he talked about me about it, and he's like almost ignore the P&L completely, right? Ignore how big of a loss you're going to take, ignore how much big of a gain you're going to make, and just think about risk reward, right? Now, don't do that completely. Don't just be like, oh, I'm just going to go all in. No. Still have a good dollar amount of loss that you want to take. But once you're in the trade, think about the risk reward. So, like, yes, this trade, this loss here was big. It was like 4 or 5 grand. But again, think about the risk reward, right? If I'm right, once I'm right, it's going to pay off 3, 4 times this loss, given you take the same amount of size. Now, not exhausting yourself on the front side is a very important rule, which I will talk about because I did that on AOPP in week 5. But it's just a good lesson where that was really something how I was able to size up and take these bigger losses and not be phased by them, was just thinking about the bigger picture risk reward of the entire play if I stuck to how I wanted to size in on these. Because again, a 4 or 5 grand loss is not detrimental to my account. I mean, I'm trading with a multiple 6-figure account, so it's no more than like 1 to 2% of my entire account. So it's totally fine. And so once we started dying again, and if you notice, every day when we've dipped, we've never dipped back to this dip, I should say. So we pulled here, we did pull late day here, but it wasn't even close to testing these lows, right? We pulled here, we pulled again, but again, not even close to the morning lows. Here, when we dip and we dip again, this is very close to making new lows. So when we start pulling even more, that's when I realized, okay, this is a trend change. Yes, these dips have held in the past, especially on this one, which is why I took that loss. But having it doing a second time just in midday, not even late day like the past 2 days had done, tells me this is weaker and it's probably gonna be backside. So I did short again. And you notice how choppy it is. And this is what really prepared me for this trade, is that I knew how choppy it was on the front side, like HTZ was. And so I knew on the backside it's going to be choppy as well. So don't, get caught up in these moves. Don't emotionally cover thinking, oh, it's going to come back. Like just stick to your plan and let it work. So you see, I didn't cover any. I didn't cover any shares because I thought, if you truly let this trade work, it should pull really big and really hard. I love the close here. I love the close down to the lows. And so the next day we just straight liquidate. Just no solid bounce. Choppier fade, but just no big bounces like you see here, or even here. And I ended up covering most in the 160s area around this level. I didn't even have patience to really let it fade. I mean, if I had a lot of patience, swinging it for a couple of days, you could have covered back below $1. But I really didn't think that was going to happen. I was quite surprised by how hard it sold off over, on a daily time frame. But again, I ended up locking in like $21,000 on that trade. So like I said, it paid off, right? Lost 5 or 6 grand on the front side, or on not the front side, just on the first attempt, and then really made back 3, 4, almost 5 times that amount on the when it actually started working. So Next big trade was LKNCY. This is a huge runner. This was massive. This was one of the strongest stocks I probably had seen like almost ever in an OTC market. And it's, you can't see it now in hindsight with the chart, but just looking at the in real time the price action level two, it almost looked like someone was caught. It looked like either some fund was buying as much shares as they possibly could, or some big short fund was trying to cover as much as they possibly could. But I mean, the aggression in the price action in real time was incredible. And so I actually ended up longing a few, and that the like 685 level, like right around here, which, in hindsight, like, if you don't know where it's going, like longing it here after this big of a run looks like such a chase. But seeing the price action, I was like, oh no, this is so strong. Like I have to long this. And if it's ever weak, I'll just cut it. And so right when I longed it, like no weakness came, like we just went straight up. So I held 2,000 shares long overnight. Next morning, I sell at $8. I tried shorting into this move, but it ended up again super strong, squeezing back. Ended up like losing like $1,000 or something. And then tried making some money more on this parabolic, but again, just so strong, so tough to get fills as strong as it was. Because yes, there's a lot of volume, but the amount of strength it had, and the like I said, the aggression of the level two and like buyers and sellers. Like if you weren't quick as hell, if you weren't the first person to try to like react, um, you were gonna get pulled on, like whether you were long or short. And so me being short, like you see here, this move, like this little candle right here from 937 to like 970. I mean, that happened within 10 seconds, like boom, immediately. So if you weren't covering at this red candle, you were gonna give a lot back on this green candle. So fortunately, I did end up losing like I think 1 or 2 grand on the ticker the entire day. Super difficult, but it is what it is. The key was the next day. Um, this bounce to previous highs held, which was awesome. Actually, I think I have my trades here. Let's get rid of this. Yeah, so you see here. So I did short out the open, but realized, again, the strength was coming, so I covered that. And I tried shorting a little bit. I didn't short that much size, but I shorted a little bit of size at the highs here. In hindsight, I should have shorted more because, again, smaller risk. You could take bigger size with a smaller loss. But considering how strong it was, I just thought if I was wrong, I was going to take a lot of slippage, so I didn't take as much size. And so I let it chop around. Finally, once it started, looks like it failing, I shorted more. Now, this was incredibly frustrating because, when you have your first red-green move like this, especially on a stock that's up from, $4 is now at 10, to have its first red-green move like this and then come back, it happens, right? HEZ happened. But to do it all after all this failure in the morning and then come back midday like that, I mean, again, I said it happens. It probably happens like 1 out of 10 times, 1 out of 15 times. But I just didn't expect that from this one. But so I thought, okay, we'll go higher. Like, will we just recover and just show even more strength and keep going? Now, something about noticing a late day fade setup is knowing the sideways price action. Seeing sideways price action like this is a perfect indicator of a late day fade. And so I saw that. That's why I started shorting here, and then I started shorting more here, and then took one more add into the bounce, this little lower high here. More sideways action, and then we just fail. We really start failing. And it's like I said, this, remember this chart, remember this intraday. This is a perfect late day fade action. Typically, late day fades, the best late day fades don't go red like this. They usually go red for the first time late day. But seeing how it came back, couldn't go back to new highs, and then showing this sideways action to then more sideways action, and then failure into late day, that's a perfect late day fade action. So you see I'm pretty patient with it. I actually don't even cover here. I actually end up adding under this bounce, and then covering it all into close here. Why did I cover no close? One, like I said, it was super strong all in this run up. It was super strong coming back. So I thought the weaker it is into the close, the stronger the next day I think it's going to be. Right? This isn't some pump and dump. Right? This isn't some total scammy company, even though it was, right? But the whole news behind this was that they paid off the SEC to remove their fraud, them, making up their sales like last year or whatever it was. So in the eyes of a lot of people, this is then now kind of like they've kind of thrown the past in the past, right? They've gotten rid of the SEC. They're like, we're done, faking our sales. So again, the weaker it looks in the close, the stronger I thought it was going to be the next day. And I ended up being spot on with that. Didn't even go red the next day. I did try taking a small short somewhere in here, but ended up covering it for like a negative like $1,500 loss. The key was waiting for it to kind of lose its audience. And what I mean by lose its audience is, everyone's still trying to dip by it, right? Here, the reason why it's held up, in my opinion, why it's holding up is like, again, it was super weak in the close, strong the next day, and people were thinking like, let's get on a dip for the next big run, right? A lot of people like to buy into weakness, thinking another run might happen because some stocks do dip and then have another even bigger run. But the key is waiting for when the audience leaves, when everyone is on to the next best play, when everyone's on to a whole different runner. What is the old runner going to do? Because usually they start fading. Usually they start giving up because there's not that audience. There's not that multi-million amounts of people buying shares to send this thing higher. And so when you see this thing start going red for the second time, I actually started getting short again. Small size stayed again, more sideways action, ended up adding more here, more sideways action, a little bit of balance, but then I love this fade in the close. And then the next morning, when we gap up but fail to get over this little bounce high, we go red again, and I end up covering I think it all in like the 740s because that was this little support here on this little dip on this day. So I think I made another like 10 grand. Made like 7,000 this pull, 10 grand on this pull because this was a little bit better setting risk levels in terms of letting it really, swing trading can give you more time to set better risks. So the fact that I was willing to swing this for a day or two allowed me to size in more appropriately after new risk levels were set. So being able to do that allowed me to make more, especially when it panicked pretty nicely down to the mid sevens there. Um, and so you see like on the daily chart, right? Like big, huge volume. And then the audience leaves, right? You see how low the volume gets down. So that's when the audience leaves, like, and everyone's on to the new best thing. If you can keep your eye on it and see key levels break down, like I saw it when red for the second time, I saw it down, broke some support levels, saw it broke $8. Those key support levels can lead people to start selling and just kind of fading it down for you. So that's exactly what happened. So I'm really happy with that trade, much more so than the first red day, considering I, unfortunately got squeezed back before the late day fade happened. So that's pretty much it for. Oh no, never mind. We got the last. That was all of week 3 up until this point right here. And what happened here is first NXTED set me off on a really bad tone for the day. Again, big runner from sub $1, sub like 50 cents to like literally $2. And I took a loss on this ticker, partially because poor risk management or poor trade management, I should say, but then also not getting filled. So coming to this gap down, we ended up being on SSR. If you don't know what SSR is, Google it, research it. Like you should know what it is if you're watching my videos. It's pretty. If you're a short seller, you should know what SSR is. Let's just put it at that. And so I think I have my trades. Let's see here. So right, I'm taking a bunch of paper cuts and stabs into strength here for the first red day. Like this is an overextended gap down. You either want to risk red, green, or previous levels from the prior day. And so I took a couple stabs, I think twice here, just seeing if it could hold. Unfortunately, into this level here, I tried shorting a lot. I knew, at some point this morning spike would pull back, especially getting up into this resistance level, like I said, from the prior day's resistance. And it all starts at like 170. And the 170s was the high for the day. And so I start putting in my orders. But because of SSR, I couldn't hit the bid. And so you see this pull here, I didn't fill anything. So for me taking, losses into the upside and then not being able to get filled for the backside, it was just super, super frustrating because it pretty much just resulted me in having to accept a loss that I just couldn't control. I couldn't control the fact that I just couldn't get filled, which really sucks and is really frustrating. And so you see here, I'm trying to like revenge trade into this, thinking it's gonna go back red. It ends up popping, so I cut it again. So I lost like $2,500 on this trade, only to see it actually then end up fading, a couple hours later. Not the end of the world, it just really, really not filling here because of SSR was probably the biggest frustration out of it all. Because really, if I had filled here, I would have covered into these two main pulls here, and I would have been green on the trade, which is really the entire plan the entire time. I just mistimed these first two stabs at it, so it sucks. It is what it is. But the big loss, obviously, that's only $2,500. Where did the other 16K come from? And that's from this pumping up NEOV. I guess shouldn't really call it pumping up. It's more of a maybe a manipulated ticker or runner. The point is, this company, if you look at the filings, they're really it's almost I feel like this stock is just here to sell shares. If you see this action, this is not natural price action whatsoever. Um, and if you know how I short pump and dumps or promotions, go watch my very first YouTube video. I talk about this. Went over FRLI, which I made quite a good amount of money on back then for me, over like a year and a half ago now, which is crazy to think about. But um, essentially, what I do is I like to start shorting these and risk. I have a very wide risk level to give it time to work and eventually sell off. And whoever's selling shares to sell all their shares, the stock price is going to drop tremendously. And so I start shorting in the high twos and then give it some time and then adding in the high threes. So I end up having like a low threes average. And I was planning on risking $4 to $5. So when we get over 4 here, I'm very hesitant to keep the trade going. I thought about many times up here cutting it. But as you can see here, we instead of having this gradual uptrend, we start kind of topping out here. We start topping out right above 4. And so I'm thinking, okay, let's see if we can actually start selling off. We start making dips. We make one more attempt at $4, keep pulling another higher low, and then we really pull down to $3. So right around here, I'm green on the trade. And so typically for pump and dumps, like promotions, how I want to handle them is like let the winners run. Like once whoever needs to sell their shares starts selling their shares, like really let this thing fade, let this thing go down to $1 where it came back from, in the low ones. And that just didn't happen. We started grinding, and then all of a sudden the squeeze just begins, and we start testing back 4, and after multiple 2 solid months of it never touching 4, and then we're touching 4 again on this bigger volume. I thought to myself, I can't risk it. It's not worth it. You can't just hold and hope. I know I've given this plenty of time. I now have a clear risk level at the low 4s after topping out there plenty, and I actually then did end up adding, a few of these lower highs because I had a good risk level now in mind. So when we get there, I just cut it. I have to eat it. So it resulted, I think, in like a total of like $13,000 to $15,000 loss, which is why you see this here. And again, it's like, okay, Kyle, that's a pretty big loss for you. That's your biggest loss ever. Like, why would you take that big of a loss? And so again, how I trade pump and dumps is, again, I'm bidding a very wide risk level, which results in usually a larger loss. I remember taking my prior biggest loss ever, which was around 3 or 4 grand on FBTA, which was another pump and dump back in like 2018, because I got bought in. And yeah, it sucks, but it's part of the system, right? Yes, I took a big loss in this, but in terms of promotions and money I've made from promotions, I've made far more money from promotions following this exact same strategy. So when I took this loss, it sucks, but again, not thinking about the P&L, it's like, no. I stuck to my plan. Yes, the plan didn't work this one time, but it's the one time it's gonna work. Like 1 out of 20 times it didn't work. 1 out of 10 times it didn't work this time. So the other 19 or 9 times it does work. Um, I'm gonna make just as much money as this much, if not more. And in fact, I actually did on BLFE. It was a similar pump and dump promotion around the same time as NEOV. And so if you go to the chart here, I think I made about the same much, if not a little bit more than I lost at NEOV. So you see, like same kind of grindy price action. Finally, this topped out, big, solid dump day, big bounce, but again, couldn't break the highs. Then we just fade. We kind of fade for months. And so usually, do you have to short this long? Like no, but NEOV and BLFE were 2 or promotions that really did last a long time, and so that just happens. You have to be willing to swing them for a very long period of time, which I do. But yeah, so it's, yes, it was a big loss. But I fully accepted it. I was okay with it. It didn't really faze me at all because I was fully prepared to take that loss by taking this trade. I never like going into a trade without the expectation of like, okay, if you really lost, how much are you okay losing? And so yes, I sized in NEOV, and yes, I took a bigger loss. But again, I was okay with it. I was fully willing to accept it. And now looking at it, it's up 30 cents higher than $4. So if I was still holding and being stubborn, I mean, I'd be down over 20, 30 grand at that point. So glad I cut it. Will I reshort it? Probably not. This is like the longest promotion I've ever seen occur. Um, Probably not going to touch it. Probably not going to even watch it anymore. Just good riddance, and it can do whatever it wants. Like there's plenty of other better trades out there to put my time and energy towards. So then we come into the 4th week of December, best week ever at 75 grand. A lot of key trades there. Again, was the LKNCY trade that I talked about, fading it down over a couple of days. CYDY was a huge win um, because it really, I mean, this red day really followed this big red day to almost to a T. If we go here, I'll have my trades here too because it just, I mean, this trade was my biggest trade in terms of P&L, but in terms of how well I could have traded something, I mean, I wouldn't say perfect because it wasn't perfect, but I mean, I just traded so well. Let's look at here's the executions here. Um, Again, similar, very this midday pull or like late morning pull is very similar to the first day. So even though you see these trades here, and you're like, man, it's called chasing. Like it's already down from 60, it's down 60 cents to $6. Like why would you short more here after taking a short there? And again, it's because I saw it prior. I saw it do it in June. So seeing it happen again here, I'm like, I almost know exactly what's going to happen. Um, so I sized up, like I said, in this month, it's all about sizing up. I took a lot of size here, covered almost all of it into these in near $5. Had a little bit left on, which again, if I in hindsight, if I'd covered it all and then was able to reshort that size just as much here, it probably would have been my new biggest gain. But again, I'm not going to chase strength. I know how this trade was going to likely play out, so I said, okay, I still have some shares short, but I have plenty. I've covered plenty to add back into those balances, which I did. And I don't cover any. I mean, this entire day, I don't cover a single share because I'm incredibly convicted that we will pull. And so when we have this flush into the close, I cover it all for about $27,000. And so why did I cover all? Same thinking with LKNCY. I thought, the weaker the close, the stronger the next day would be, and that's actually what happened is on the last time too. If you actually look on the daily chart here, when we have this huge dump day, we actually gap up and have a green day. And so I thought that might be similar to this day as well. We actually end up going red the second day, and I do end up reshorting some. Smaller amount, I think I only made like $2,000 on this fade here. But I just really almost couldn't be happier with how I traded this on this day. If I just had covered all of it here and then reshorted it all back near red green, I mean, it definitely would have been my new biggest gain. But again, I just couldn't be happier with it. Besides that one little thing, and it just really set the tone for the rest of the week. But BLF, or not BLFE, AOPP was towards the end of for week 4 and into week 5. And this has probably been the most frustrating run or two short that I've experienced in quite some time, mainly because it's just impressive. It really is impressive by how well it's been manipulated, by how well a lot of people are long this thing. Like a lot of people believe in this company, and I'm not here to speculate whether it'll succeed or not. I'm just here to trade the price action in the meantime. But I mean, multiple times on the way up, I took quite a few losses of anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000, even up to 2,500. Like I think in this move, in this fade, I really thought this almost looks like MMEDF, right? You see all these higher highs and lower lows. At some point, you think a huge flush is going to come, and unfortunately, it didn't. So I ended up covering into this bounce for a loss. I ended up shorting it more here into these two bounces. Got greedy, didn't cover any near two. Tried covering some here and just got lazy and didn't really want to hit the ass. So when it starts bouncing, I have to cover it all here for a loss. Reshort again the next day, fades, and then this is where they actually start tweeting out that this company is so funny. Their Twitter account, they started. This is the half day. This was on what was it, Christmas Eve? So it was a half day. Every 30 minutes, the company on their Twitter account started tweeting the letters to spell out NASDAQ. So they first started tweeting out N, then A, then S, then D, then A, then Q. And so as they kept tweeting every letter every 30 minutes, it became more obvious they were tweeting out NASDAQ. And so this stock started squeezing. Luckily, I cut it all in like the 240s and like 250s, right around this level here. So I didn't get squeezed on, thankfully. But the moment I started realizing they were tweeting out NASDAQ, they're just super hypey and super, I don't say pumpy, but it's just funny how the things that some companies come up with to get their stock price up. So, they very well may go to the NASDAQ, but it's like, I can't think of the last time a company has tweeted out they're going to NASDAQ before they just put out an official PR. And it was great. I'm glad the company did it because it gave me a great long opportunity. So I actually started longing um, under $3. Like, so after it topped out at 285, I actually started longing here into this last dip. And then it squeezed right up to $3, and then right into the close, they finally put out a PR saying we are uplisting to the Nasdaq after tweeting out Nasdaq. And this is over the weekend, so the news traveled over the weekend. I was long 10,000 shares from like 290 or 290, low 290s. And then at the open, we just squeeze. We just full on. I mean, huge volume. Unfortunately, I sold most of my shares before $4. I think I sold all my shares before $4. So in hindsight, it's like, man, I really sold pretty early, but um, it was my. I did make it. Or I did make my second biggest long gain on it. I think I made like 7,700. And my biggest long gain ever is 8,000. So super cool to see that. Obviously, if I was a little more patient with my long, I would have been able to sell above four for probably over a 5-figure gain, first 5-figure long gain, but it's not a big deal. Coming into the next day, um, I did try shorting, and I think this is what was also incredibly difficult about this ticker. It was that I almost never filled shorting out the open, almost never. The fills to get executed were, for some reason, at least for me, maybe with my broker, maybe with my Wi-Fi, my internet connection, but for whatever reason, I never got size, if not anything, on this red green move. And I actually got a couple of messages from other students and other traders about this, and they were like, "What can I do to get fills?" I'm like, "I can't tell you. I'm not getting fills either. Like, I don't know who's getting short or who's selling their shares before us and getting executed before us." Um, but I just wasn't getting filled at all. So I totally missed this move. Tried shorting some at 420. It tapped 419, so missed that by a cent. And it pulled again. So I completely missed this move. I start shorting into this bounce here. We start squeezing. I cover it again for another like 2K loss. So again, incredibly frustrating. I'm probably like break even on this ticker at this point. But then we come into this day. This was the first time this ticker is closed near its lows on a red day. If we look at the daily, it wicked right here, it wicked right here, it wicked right here. But this is the day where it finally actually closed at its lows for red day. That's a huge trend change in my opinion. And so I saw that. I started shorting, at the lows here. It sucks to have a shitty entry like that, but at the same time, I got to trust it. I was willing to risk 410 here. So we shorted like 7,000 shares overnight. Next morning, we have a huge gap down in panic. Luckily, I cover most of my shares under 3. And then I want to see if we have another pull. Because like I said, we've usually had always, we've had one pull and then one more pull, pull here and then one more pull here. So I thought we should probably have one more pull to new lows. But when we got to right around here, a huge like 20 or 200K bidder came in. And so I covered like almost immediately and got a below 3 fill, which was like the fastest I've ever gotten filled. Like I couldn't believe I got filled that quickly because compared to all the other times I've been trying to short, like I just could never fill to save my life, and it's usually always leads to slippage. So I made like another $6,000 on this trade, completely avoided this bounce, and now we pretty much almost closed green on the day. Not entirely, like we closed down 4%, but it's just amazing that this sticker still is continuing to hold up. Because yeah, I mean, maybe they go to the Nasdaq, maybe they don't. All I know is we're up from 5 cents. I mean, we're up from 5 cents to 360 in a matter of 2 months. I mean, that's incredible. So where it goes from now, I have no idea. I'm just there to trade the price action, and we'll see what goes. So, this I think is gonna be a long video. I'm not sure how long it's going, but I know you guys like it, so let's keep doing it. But so yeah, that's the month. Great win percentage, great risk reward ratio between my gains and biggest gains, and then we go to the whole year. So looking at my biggest gains and biggest losses, you see here even my biggest loss. Let's go back here. Screw it up. Even my biggest loss, which is NEOV, is still smaller than all my top biggest gains, at least in the top 5. So that's great to see. Like it's like really what you want to see as a great risk reward in the bigger picture of your system, as a trader. So I'm really happy to see that. And only one 5-figure loss. Like all my biggest gains are over 5. And then the next thing is a huge jump down to 4K. That's awesome to see. Like only one big loss, and then the rest are easily manageable losses from my account size. Again, biggest months, December and July. Worst months, we're still green. I've thankfully, knock on wood, haven't had a losing month in almost 4 years now, since I've been profitable. So that's really cool to see that consistency. But again, rough months do happen. I mean, September was only $5,000. I mean, it's very close for me to take that month green, or month red. So it is what it is. If a red month happens, it happens. That's trading. Again, two best weeks, both best weeks were in December, which is why December was such a huge month. Two worst weeks were one of the few red weeks I had throughout the year. Um, Again, that happens. Like, again, you're gonna have red days, you're gonna have red weeks. I think rarely you should have red months. And if you do that, you should always end up green year over year. Um, Win rate overall 66%. That's really, really good. I'm happy with that. I always like being over 60 or 60%. Just from a psychological standpoint, I like to think I'm winning more than a head flip or than a coin toss. So, anything over 50% is pretty good. Over 60 is really good that I like. Um, Best days, and then again, all the averages over the year. My goal for 2020 was to have an average gain over $1,000. So I'm really happy to see that. And then for the total profit, after borrow fees, $670,000, which is so beyond my expectations. To have a 570% return is also far beyond my expectations. The expectation I'd set, if you go back to, so 2018, I made $30,000. 2019, I made $90,000. So I thought going into 2020, could I keep this trend up? Like, could I triple my profits every year? So I thought if I had tripled my 2019 profits, 90K times three is $270,000. So I thought if I could make $270,000 in 2020, that'd be awesome. That'd be right on track to what I think I'm doing. That'd be just really cool. Uh, and I crossed 270,000 like in like June or July. And so when I did that, I was like, okay, wow, this month, the 2020 in general is just a crazy year, giving me a lot of opportunity to make a lot of money. Let's see if I can get to 500. Um, cross 500 like in November, December. I said, okay, let's see if I get to 600, and then just blew that as well. So, uh, any expectations I've made about my trading has always been wrong, whether it's for better or for worse. I mean, I remember thinking I was going to make way more than 30,000 in 2018. Ended up making way less. So any expectations I've had about how my year is going to go has usually always been wrong, whether it's for better or for worse. So, excuse me. So for going into 2021, uh, I don't really have any expectations. I mean, I'm at about 827,000 in career profits, so I probably will most likely cross the 1 million mark next year. Um, but in terms of how much I think I'm going to make on the year of 2021, I have no idea, guys. I really don't. And I don't want to, and I almost don't even want to set a goal because, like, why would I sell myself short like that? Right? Like, thinking going into, now, obviously, this is in hindsight, but like how 2020 planned out and to have that goal of making 270 and end up making, 400 more than that, it's like, why would I sell myself short like that? Why put a number that I think I'm going to make in the year and like, not limit myself to that, but what if it's way better, right? Or what if it's way worse and I'm so caught in this expectation. So going to 2020, I really have no idea how much I'm gonna make. And that's I think the best way to go about it because it allows me to be prepared every single day. I'm not gonna take any one trade or one profit or one profitable week or month for granted. Because I've got the whole year left to worry about. And so whatever happens. I mean, the second stimulus check is coming out, which really sent the market on fire in 2020. So, and like I said, December was one of the most insane months I've ever seen. So if we keep that up going in January, I mean, I'm sure it'll be another great portions of the year that I can capitalize on. But I'm just not going to set any expectations. I'm just going to trade well, and we'll see where we go. So happy New Year's, guys. Um, Comment or ask questions in the comment section of anything you want to maybe see in 21. If you guys have any ideas, more trade reviews, different things besides the monthly recaps, let me know. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching.